We may not think about it, but we're all a part of something larger than any single one of us. And our work is one of the forces that connects us.
It looks crazy downtown.
Good morning, the Pets Hot to tell me assist you.
A revolution is happening right before our eyes.
What happens if they replace you with a machine?
Artificial intelligence, remote work, spiraling inequality. It can be hard to make sense of where we're going. What if people from 3 different industries, from the service entrance to the C-suite, invited us into their lives and told us, what makes a good job good?
I just want to be at home, my refrigerator's full, my bills is paid, that's peace.
This job is the money supply for my actual passion.
You'll never be able to make a living in the arts.
When I see a father bring his little son with him, it makes me feel like I missed a lot.
What does it take to feel satisfied?
I'd have the privilege of building something that would hopefully mean something in the world.
I grew up watching my dad define himself through his work. She always tells me, work isn't your only identity.
She seems more well-rounded than me.
What if the life you dream of didn't seem so distant?
It would be nice if you got at least minimum wage.
I went bankrupt. The union affords people to be able to live.
When you have it all, what responsibility do you have to other people?
What comes from people should go back to people multiple times over.
I got a jam coming. I can hear it.
They don't believe in working a 9 to 5 like we've done.
Money is not a motive.
But you need it.
I'm working 9 more years and I'm done.
What about your wife?
Oh, you'll be working there forever. Forget about it.
That was the trailer for the new Netflix docu-series Working, What We Do All Day. And this is Factual America. I'm your host, Matthew Sherwood. Each week I watch a hit documentary and then talk with the filmmakers and their subjects. What brings you joy in work? What gives you purpose? What makes a good job good? These are the questions that President Barack Obama asks in the fascinating docu-series Working, What We Do All Day. Join us as we talk with director Caroline Sue about the ways in which we find meaning in our work and how our experiences and struggles connect us on a human level, be it an entry-level home care worker in Mississippi or a former president of the United States. Stay tuned. Caroline Sue, welcome to Factual America. How are things with you?
They're great, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an honor to have you on. We're talking about the new Netflix docuseries that is releasing, or we're recording this beforehand, but most of you will hear this afterwards. I think it's releasing on May 17th. It's Working, What We Do All Day. And so welcome again to Factual America. It's great to have you on, and congratulations on getting this project made and onto Netflix.
Thank you very much. It's been a long time in the making, so it's good that it's finally getting out there.
I think if anyone who sees this will appreciate that comment even more. I think it was you took a lot on in doing this in this project, but maybe for most of our listeners and viewers will not have seen this yet. So what is Working What We Do All Day all about?
So it's really a documentary series that is inspired by Studs Terkel's book, Working, which is about kind of what life is like for everyday people from all walks of life. And kind of taking that inspiration at a time when things are really changing for a lot of people and people don't know what the future looks like. So it's, we're trying to give people an idea of what life looks like and what it will look like, and some, in a way that's very human and intimate.
Okay. And how did this project come about? I mean, we know that maybe in our intro, people have heard that President Obama is involved in this project. He certainly narrates the series. Whose idea was this? How did this come about?
So, I think the president had been interested in this subject of work, and, his life's work has certainly been about jobs and helping people lead kind of better lives. And Davis Guggenheim, who's the head of the production company, they came together and decided they wanted to do a series about it. And then I was reached out to by someone who worked at Concordia who said, "Oh, it's a series about work." And I said, "I'm not really interested. Who wants to watch something about work when they get home from work?" And then he said, "Oh, it's with President Obama." And then I immediately said, "Yes, that sounds great." So yeah, so it was, when we started out, we had no idea how we wanted the series to be, what it would be. And we just kind of dove in.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, okay, so how do you approach a series about work? I mean, like you said, you initially were wary, but then you find out President Obama's involved, and but how do you make it? I mean, how do you make it into a fascinating docuseries as you've had?
Yeah, it's, we basically kind of set out to figure out what is work? Like, how do we look at it? What are the important things to kind of understand about work? What are, trends? What do economists say about work? What do sociologists say about work? So, it's a ginormous subject. And what we realized kind of early on is that work is really the center of life for most people, including myself. I mean, it's where people make friends. It's where we spend a lot of your life is at work and working. It's where people meet their spouses. It's like, it's a
where
center.
I met mine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you still work with her? Is she in the studio somewhere?
No, we don't work together, but we did years ago in one of our first jobs. Yeah.
So that was probably at a time when you could actually meet your spouse at work. Now,
Exactly.
It's a little trickier, but so, just trying to get our minds around this very kind of amorphous subject and what would a series about work say and what would be interesting about it. So, we did just a ton of research about the future of work and some various things
and he's,
that,
I mean, it's as you say, it's
interesting.
a keen interest of his. And yet I mean, as you said, it's such a ginormous subject, and also you gotta make this interesting for an audience. I mean, you end up focusing on 3 key sectors, don't you? That's one way you've kind of boiled it down. And what is it? Tech, services, and home care, I think it is. And why these 3?
Well, we wanted to, I mean, we felt like if we had this opportunity to make the series, it had to be very relevant. So those are 3 sectors of the future. So a lot of people will find that the jobs that are available to them will be in one of those sectors. So, we wanted to give people kind of a behind the scenes look at what these jobs of the future look like.
And it's also because a lot of the other jobs that we think of are just disappearing, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the themes that we kind of set out, exploring is automation and AI and, what jobs are going to become outmoded and what are like great jobs of the future. So that's how we came to our driverless car story.
Yeah, well, speaking of which, I mean, you've got, and that's the other thing, you so focus on 3 key areas of work, but then you also look at, in terms of place and the companies you focused on, because it's 3 companies and mostly in 3 different parts of the United States. I mean, how did you go about identifying those companies and deciding to focus on them?
I used to describe it as being like a Sudoku puzzle where you're figuring out the top and you're also figuring out what happens when you add things up in the bottom. But it really is more like a Rubik's Cube, just like so many variables and trying to weigh everything against each other. And like, if we do this, is this place too similar? So eventually we were able to kind of narrow it down to industries and cities and kind of put them together. I mean, in terms of locations, we wanted places that were kind of evocative of like America's past and like the working past and places where you might see those kind of historical underpinnings like today. And it's not really super overt, but it's kind of there.
Yeah.
So
no, I think it's brilliantly done. I mean, you've got so for our listeners who've not seen this yet, we're talking about Pittsburgh, which is a area that's I don't say completely, but largely reinvented itself. I mean, most Americans of a certain age will think of it as steel mills and things, but it's far from that. And I've never been, but I've heard it's a lovely place and it's really changed. And I love your dog in the background.
Oh, yeah, I have a giant dog who will be listening in on the interview. Yeah.
That's fine. It won't be the first dog to make an appearance. I was in New York City, and then Mississippi, which I really found that interesting.
Mississippi is an interesting place. One thing that we learned, like a little factoid that I thought was fascinating, was that it used to be the richest state in the Union, and now it's the poorest. And I had never even, I think people think of Mississippi usually as, not thriving, which is true. So it's interesting to see how a place can go up and down depending on what kind of industries or, economy.
And then, okay, so it's going to sound like you can tell I've got maybe I have an economics and business background as well, but you also focus on I like the three types of companies. So you've got, a word I haven't used in a long time, but like a conglomerate, literally, in Tata. And then you've got Aurora, which was a startup. It's more than a startup now, but it is an up and coming. And then you've got this small, medium-sized enterprise. That's is it Mississippi Homecare? That's the other. And so very, it's very much a great case study approach to this that you've got. Not, I don't know if that was your intention, but it is very much like you've got a lot of, a lot represented there in terms of what the kind of places people are working.
Yeah, we definitely tried to kind of, back up the series with as much research as possible, and then hope that it kind of fell away with the actual characters who we were following and the people who we were spending time with. So we did have all of these prerequisites, like we wanted to do a tech company. We wanted to do something about like kind of how a city gets reinvented and who gets left out. And, Mississippi has a long history of exclusion. That's not the story we were telling, but that definitely has an effect on, jobs there today. And then New York was actually, we were supposed to film in Mumbai at the Taj Hotel, which is a famous Tata hotel. Right. But because of COVID, traveling abroad was kind of just a no-go. So we pivoted and we shot at the pier, which ended up being great for us.
Yeah. And I think, and in some ways, probably good too, because it ends up all three locations are in the U.S. Not that this is only, it has an appeal well beyond U.S. audiences, obviously, but it kind of squares the circle, if you will, that all of them are in the U.S.
Yeah, it's a little bit neater, and I live in New York, so it was very convenient for me.
You're probably thinking, why hadn't you thought of that sooner?
Why don't I ever shoot in New York? This is great.
Exactly. And you have an incredible level of access with these companies. It's not every company that would just open up their doors and have you, because you're going in there. It's you're showing everything.
I'm always shocked when people open their doors just to any documentary crew or camera crew, but they were really open, and they didn't even know at the beginning that the president was involved. So
is that right?
So they just had enormous amount of trust. I think, I tend to think that if you're like really proud of your company, you kind of want to show it off and you don't feel like you have anything to hide. So that might have been part of it.
Right. Yeah. And you weren't trying to, and that's part of how you identified them, right? You knew you had places that at least had a relatively good work culture and reputation, because there's, I'm sure, plenty of exposés out there about things that aren't great, right?
I'm sure, yeah. So we wanted to be able to honestly say, like, okay, these are companies that we're not like actively endorsing, but we feel like they're not these like evil corporations that are doing bad things. So
okay. Hey, well, I think that gives us a good time to give our listeners and viewers a quick early break. So we'll be right back with Caroline Sue, the director of Working What We Do All Day. The docu-series is released on Netflix on May 17th. You're listening to Factual America. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Alamo Pictures to keep up to date with new releases or upcoming shows. Check out the show notes to learn more about the program, our guests, and the team behind the production. Now back to Factual America. Welcome back to Factual America. I'm here with Caroline Sue, the director of Working, What We Do All Day. It's released on Netflix on May 17th. And then the other thing, Caroline, we were talking about this making the film and, finding the subjects, both in terms of, certainly in terms of the companies and the sectors, and then I guess that then led you to the individuals that you follow. But this series literally, it takes us up the corporate ladder, doesn't it? And that was I thought that was not I wasn't necessarily expecting that when I heard it was a series on work. So what was the thinking in there, and how did that come about?
I think that we realized that, your perspective on work and the reality of work is so different depending on where you are, what kind of work you do, and where you are on the ladder. So we kind of wanted to show different sides of work from, different levels of the same company. And then we thought, the president's also really interested in the idea of connection. And so we wanted to show how people's jobs affected each other, even if they didn't realize it. So there might be someone whose job really affects what you do, but you don't even necessarily know them.
Or have ever met them or anything.
Exactly. And you never will, maybe. So kind of wanted to show that kind of interconnection. And then also, one of the pitfalls of doing it that way is that you can sometimes people who have more are really easy to demonize over people who have less, or, they're kind of easy, facile judgments you can make when you juxtapose people that way. But we really wanted to try and not do that, and just kind of show there are certain universal things that everyone goes through.
I liked how also the things are kind of interweave, like a character you meet in episode 1 maybe has a bit part in episode 3, or that kind of thing. It shows there is this kind of this interconnectedness you're talking about. And I guess probably these companies are better for that. It did strike me that, like the Pierre Hotel and all of them, that seemed to be a bit more open in interaction from senior levels on and down and back up.
Yeah, people, work there for decades. When you have a really stable situation, people then they really, it's a cliche, but they really do become family. Because when you work with someone 8 hours a day for 30 years, you're gonna, know them really well. Whereas if you, and that's one of the things, being an Uber driver for Carmen, that's kind of lonely work. You don't ever have that, that culture. As much as, office culture can be annoying and bad, it can also be great and make you feel like you're part of something when it's good.
So people should check out the series. I think it's very fascinating. It raises a lot of issues that I think are probably everyone's kind of aware of, but we don't often. I guess that's the other thing. How often do we think about work? We probably think about work way too much, and we think about it a lot, but we don't necessarily think about it in this way, do we?
I never did. I only just thought, I guess, in a self-absorbed way about my own work. I'm do I like my work? What do I want to do next? But kind of taking a step back and looking at it, I just learned more than I ever have on any project about the world, just about how the world works. And,
So what did you learn? What were you not expecting, or what has surprised you in doing this project?
I think, one very basic thing is I knew nothing about the home care industry. And now I feel knowing how central it will be for all of our lives, how most of us will at one point rely on a home care aid at some point, whether for our parents or ourselves and how that's such a bad job, really, how that's a hard job and really poorly, it's paid less than a McDonald's worker. that was really sobering. And I think when we were making it, like all of us went through some home care related thing in our own lives.
Right.
That kind of brought that home. And then it just made me really like ask questions like, why is like women's work? And that was a question that came from the president. Like, why are some jobs so kind of stubbornly tied to women?
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, why are those jobs considered unskilled? So it kind of made me just kind of think of the basics. Like, why do we think that factory work is a much more difficult job than like taking care of another human being?
Right.
And then kind of learning that that's for a whole host of reasons, some of which like date back in time to policies and.
Right. I mean, I agree with you, especially on the home care side. I mean, just in my own personal life, currently in terms of family members, I'm encountering home care for probably the first time, and what has surprised me is, so my father, and I think it's one of these things where, like for instance, my brother tells me, well, the hospice nurses come in, and I'm expecting it to be a woman, and it's actually a man, I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't obviously matter, but you do have these preconceptions of who does what.
Yeah. I mean, those are jobs. Those are jobs mostly held by women.
Yeah.
So it's unusual to have a.
Yeah. And at the same time, what does it say about us as a society that we, for whatever reason, we value it so little? Something that is, and I'm probably everyone, it does come down to, I'm not saying in our situation, but people will say, well, how much is that care going to cost? And can I afford it? Right. So I can understand the pressures to keep costs down, but yet what are we saying? Like you said, that, what's the young woman who ends up talking with President Obama at the end in the
Randy.
Randy. Yeah. So she was like, even she could have made more at the chicken plant, right? Or
it's the best job in Mississippi for her. Yeah. I mean, it does make you wonder, like, where we put our priorities. And also you think of it, like, we don't think of it as, like, being the most important role that needs to be, like, we think, oh, I have to spend this much on rent or this much on food. But, like, people question the cost of spending money on, someone who's, like, taking care of the people dearest to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's... as you said, in working with President Obama, and like we said, it raises a lot of issues, and these things are happening. I mean, do you have any chats with him? I mean, he was obviously president for 8 years. I mean, he must have, does he have any thoughts about things he might have done differently if he had, if he could go back? I mean, like we all do, I'm sure, in terms of,
I would never dare to speak for the president on his presidential legacy. He's my favorite president. So, I mean, I think that this is, these are all, for instance, it's like we spent 9 months researching this before we shot anything. Right. But what we came to understand is just like tip of the iceberg compared to someone who spent like his entire career working on these issues. So, he lives and breathes this stuff. And he said something at the beginning, which I didn't really get. When we were, I think the first meeting, he said something about like the luminosity of people. And I'm not a very sentimental person or a very probably poetic person, but he said, when you go around and you talk to all these people, you realize there's a luminosity to people. And I was kind of like, I don't know if I buy that for me, like, in terms of my perspective. But then when you talk to all these people, you realize that people have so much to say and have such clarity in what they think and believe and know that it's really incredible. I mean, if someone were to turn the camera on me and just ask me to talk about, like, I mean, I would just be a bumbling mess, but like people are it's just always surprising how articulate people are and how they look at things kind of philosophically. And
I mean, everyone, and I'm sure it was, mean, everyone that you have in the series, it certainly fits that bill, right? And I think back to the Randy, I found that whole scene in the supermarket, in the grocery store, really interesting because not only is she and even leading up to that, 'cause she is philosophical. She is, she's not seeing this as just a job. She is seeing this as, it's about meaning in her life. What does she want to do and how she wants to help people and things like that. But I thought when she turned it around and asked, I won't go into the answer, but when she asked the president the question, that was quite, that was quite poignant.
It was. I mean, we were all shocked and just looking at each other like we can't believe the poise of this woman to just, and that was one of the greatest moments of shooting is that, because we didn't ask her to ask him that. We just said, oh, if you want to ask him some questions, you should go ahead.
Right.
But yeah, she's an old soul. She has kind of wisdom beyond her years and a way with words. And I mean, one of my favorite parts of the series is actually in that same episode in the scene in McDonald's when she and her friends, one of them is saying people say what kind of crops do you grow in Mississippi? When does she, as if she was a farm, everyone is a farmer. And she said, I've never planted a crop in my life. That people, and then Randy says something oh, if you can Google it, basically, you can know anything. You can live anywhere and know anything. And that is, we have these I mean, I live in New York City, so I have some biases probably about other parts of the country, knowing certain things. But people, wherever you live. Yeah.
What I love about that story too is that she'd gone to Missouri and they said, oh, you guys, and you probably, most of your friends in New York think, well, Missouri, Mississippi, it's, what crops do they grow in Missouri is what they're thinking, but no, I think it's this kind of, is it a leveling up or is it a leveling down? But yes, you're right. Everyone's got, at our fingertips,
Yeah.
Even the working poor most likely have a smartphone, so they've got this little mini computer in their hand and they've got that at, that, which could be quite a liberating thing actually in some ways.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, actually we kind of tried to hint at this in the series, in episode 2 a little bit, but, one of the things that President Obama said is that because of Instagram, for instance, you can see all these fabulous lives.
There's that. Yeah.
Of people, and and everyone can see it.
Yeah.
So that has an effect.
Yeah.
People feel like they should be living like Jay-Z, and if you're not, then who are you?
Well, exactly, and we all do it. And the thing is, I wasn't even on Facebook till a couple of years ago. I had to do it for this job actually, but I then started, finding old friends and things, and I was just like, oh my God, look at these lives. Everything's perfect. They've.
Oh yeah, I can't go on Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is my daughter not eating organic kale for breakfast?
Yeah.
It just makes you question all of your choices in life.
Exactly. I mean, speaking of choices in life and things, I mean, we were talking about things you've learned from the series and what people, when they see this, what they'll find out about, well, just maybe give everyone pause for thought about where we are and where things are headed with how we spend the vast majority of our days. But, are there lessons here to be learned for the documentary industry, in terms of working conditions and things like that,
Well, that's in the news a lot these days. I mean, I think, the series isn't my personal platform for my ideas. I'm trying to channel it, but at the same time, I think some of some things that really hit home were the beauty of work, not to be too cheesy, but when someone does something incredibly well, no matter what it is, there's a beauty to it, and it kind of reaffirms your faith in humanity. Even if someone you're getting a coffee and someone is just really on it, or we worked with this incredible crew, we tried to work with the same crew and on all of the shoots just for the intimacy, and just when we were shooting with the president, just seeing how, I mean, these are people who are always on top of their game, every shoot, every day, because in our industry, you have to be, because you get hired,
Right.
if you have a bad experience with someone, you're not going to hire them again. But it makes you kind of like in a Richard scary way, see all these people around you who are doing their work and just like appreciate the like integrity of it when people are doing it well. And we all have our functions, and if someone doesn't do something, it can affect everyone else. And
I love the Richard Scarry reference. It's the first one on any of our episodes, but I was a huge fan when I was a kid, so thank you for doing that. But I mean, it's an industry where, like, even in one of the episodes, is it the second one, I think, they're driving around Pittsburgh and they're talking about what lives used to be like, and we're still in a. I hear what you're saying about. I completely agree. The whole world would fall over and not function if people, if it's just all this trust we have in all our fellow humans that we're all going to do our jobs to the best of our ability, or at least try. Some don't, but most of us do, I think. But even like, it was an era where, they talked about, well, in this case, back in that time, it would have been mostly fathers, but fathers coming home and having time in the evenings to pitch baseballs with their sons, and not just documentary, but all industry. We're working just such long hours, and I know we throw ourselves into it, but at the same time, I don't know what can be done about that, but it's one of these things that if we could we're constantly on the clock, it seems like.
Yeah, I think that's one thing, at least for me and some people I know, like COVID really changed that a little bit. It kind of made you pause and think like, okay, I'm like, what is the purpose of all of this? And what do I really want? And what's important? I think, for those of us who were like frontline workers who could have that kind of moment of like, okay, reassessing. We talked a lot about like, okay, the Great Resignation, is that something we should be addressing? Or working from home. But I think it didn't seem like the Great Resignation was really truly a thing, and that working from home was something that really only a small portion of people really could do. A lot of people just had to go to work the whole time.
Yeah. No, I think, it's interesting about the Great Resignation, because it is, just so if listeners don't know what we're talking about,
sorry, I veered off.
No, it's just that all these people, a lot of people have left the job force. It's not just in the U.S., but certainly in the U.S., a lot of people left the workforce sort of permanently. There's that, and also people were resigning and moving jobs very quickly. And so you have all these, in theory, technically you have all these job openings, but you still also have a lot of people that are out of work. So, it's kind of a hard one to explain, and I think it's you didn't need to go there. You'll have economists are writing about it and trying to figure out what's happened, but no one really knows.
Yeah, people would become home care workers if they were better jobs, probably. There are a lot of jobs that people don't want to do because they're poorly paid.
Exactly.
I think there is also like a big generational thing. That was one of the biggest things I learned about, is how different it is, how younger people tend to look at work differently and expect more from their jobs than, say, I did when I was young.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point that's made. I think the president says that it's even the, people in their first job are looking for the meaning in that job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And some of us, and probably maybe we're of a generation that was looking for meaning eventually, or hoping to find meaning, but you also knew that you needed to pay the bills. And then you had, our parents' generation or whatever, who were like, well, you just got to get a job. You just have to provide for your family, and thinking less about that. So it is interesting, but I don't think it's necessarily, it's probably, it's good that they're thinking that way, I would say.
Yeah, I think, I at least would have a knee-jerk reaction, which is like, when I was coming up, I had to do this and this. But when you really like kind of open your mind to it, you kind of are thinking like, yeah, you should be able to be your full self at work. Not kind of cowering under,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Be yourself, but I guess it's if I'm going to be the play sort of the old man in the room, I'm going to say that or whatever job you're in, try to find the meaning in it, I guess, is another way of looking at it.
I'm going to use that next time I have to I'm talking to a disgruntled production assistant.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, let's see how far you get with that one.
Yeah, I definitely did not find meaning in all of the work that I did when I was younger.
No. And my parents pushed me into jobs that I was like, oh my God, I never want to do this again. And, I mean, thank goodness. Oh, I worked, one of my first summer jobs to get me through college was working for the highway department. So yeah, it was.
What did that mean? Like roadkill?
I had to pick up roadkill. I had to bury it. I've had to put tarmac down in the hot Texas sun. I've had to, the good days were when you got to ride around in a truck and put highway signs up and things like that. But so it was supposed to. I think my dad said I would write about it someday. I haven't, but there were certainly a lot of characters that I encountered in that work. I think it gives you an appreciation for what a lot of people. I mean, I had the luxury that it was 3 months in a year for 4 years or something, and there were people there who had been there 30-something years, right? And so, and their perspective, they're always like, "Oh, you're a college boy. At least you're going to get a job in an air-conditioned office someday." And that was their dream job, that they wouldn't have to be out. I mean, it's a different perspective, certainly, that we don't always have.
I mean, that's one of the things that, sorry, I have to put my computer in that, like all of the service jobs, that's one thing we learned. They're all are hard on your body. Like a lot of the worst paid jobs are like physically laborious and take a toll on you. So,
yeah. And then I've got some teenagers, and they're doing sort of, again, service jobs to just, and it's interesting to hear when they come home and what they have to say about it, and complaining about how their feet hurt because they've been standing all day and things like that. So, it's, anyway, we're not here to...
No, but that's what it's kind of all about. I mean, that's kind of what it's all about at the end of the day.
Yeah. And what's speaking of work and back to you, Caroline, what is, so what's next for you? Are you, in terms of projects?
So I'm finishing a feature doc, which I don't think I can talk about yet.
Okay.
That's something totally different style. I never like to do the same thing twice. So, and then, I mean, this honestly was so demanding on all levels for so many years that I need to take a little break from work and to kind of reassess what the meaning in my work will be.
Well, I think that's a good bit of advice, and I wish you well with that. And whatever you do end up doing, or when you can tell us, we'd love to have you on again. So if we haven't scared you off. So just to remind our listeners and viewers, we've been talking with Caroline Sue, the director of Working, What We Do All Day, released on Netflix on May 17th. So Caroline, thank you again. So pleasure to chat with you.
You too. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Factual America. If you did, please remember to like us and share us with your friends and family, wherever you happen to listen or watch podcasts. I would also like to thank those who make this podcast possible. A big shout out to Sam and Joe at Inner Sound Audio in York, England. A big thanks to Amy Ord, our podcast manager at Alamo Pictures, who makes sure we continue getting great guests onto the show and everything runs smoothly. And finally, a big thanks to you, our listeners. Many of you have been with us for 4 incredible seasons. Please keep sending us feedback and episode ideas, whether it is on YouTube, social media, or directly by email. This is Factual America, signing off.
You've been listening to Factual America. This podcast is produced by Alamo Pictures, specializing in documentaries, television, and shorts about the USA for international audiences. Head on down to the show notes for more information about today's episode, our guests, and the team behind the podcast. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Alamo Pictures. Be the first to hear about new productions, festivals showing our films, and to connect with our team. Our homepage is alamopictures.co.uk.